We are just going to give ourselves a minute, and at exactly 12 we'll start our discussion.
No, that's fine with us.
Okay.
So, like I said yesterday, I've got my backup team. So as and when I need specifics in terms of the act, Enya and Arno will probably chip in and give better clarity.
That's fine. It's always good, you know, to come with the support. Even myself, I have it as well. It's exactly 12. I think we can start our discussion now. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the iGnite seminar brought to you by Benge BC. My name is Blessmom Denge, and I'll be your host for this afternoon. Thank you again. I know there are people that are joining us on this call from beyond our borders, and it's always exciting to have people interested in supporting businesses in the motherland. Last week we had an interesting webinar on Friday when we invited the captain of the A team, Dr. Lance Mambondian, and we spoke about the impact and effect of COVID-19 on businesses. But for me, there were three key takeaways from the discussion that we had last week. The first takeaway was that in times of crisis, it is not a time to fold hands, but it is a time to make decisions. It is a time to act. And the second takeaway for me was that as a business leader, as an SME, you always have to look at your costs, especially in this tough time. Otherwise, your business will fold. And lastly, the COVID-19 pandemic also calls for us to make tough decisions. Probably maybe you need to downsize your business, to rescale down. You have to make all those tough decisions so that things can happen. But at the same time, when you look at it, we are likely to be in this situation that we're in for a while. COVID-19 is here, and we don't know when we are likely to really open our businesses and to operate fully. But it does not mean, as a business person, that your business has to shut down. As we say, the beat must go on. Even Liverpool, we are going to turn the COVID here. So definitely, yes, indeed, business must go on. As SMEs, again, there's a discussion to say, should we participate in tenders or should we not? Maybe we are too small. But I'll throw the question back to you. Why would you think you should not participate in the construction of the Mashingo Bed Bridge road? Why not? Do you think you're not big enough? This is the discussion that we'll be having this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We want to unpack this discussion and see how you can participate, how you can join, how you can benefit. Before we go into our discussion for the day, may I please request all the delegates to just mute their microphones. Thank you very much. The discussion is will be just slightly over an hour long. The first part of the discussion will be discussing our topic of the day with our panelists, and then we'll also have the question and answer segment, which is the last part of the discussion. During the question and answer segment, we will allow you to ask your questions directly to the panelists. And we again advise you that you are quite free to ask the questions that you have, the panelists, but also just mindful that this is a business forum. Ladies and gentlemen, we have all seen the headlines, especially for the solar projects that was supposed to be done in Rwanda. And there's also a term that circulates among us to say tenderpreneur. And I don't even like that word. I really don't. This afternoon, we have brought two panelists, two key stakeholders within the tendering process for us to unpack what does it mean to participate in a tender. How can, as an SME, how can you participate in a tender? As a business person, how can you benefit from these tenders that are happening in this country? Firstly, from the Procurement Regulatory Authority of Zimbabwe, we have invited the Capacity Building Director, Mr. Cliff Gondo. Cliff, a pleasant welcome to the webinar.
you, Blessing, and it's afternoon now. Good afternoon, everyone.
A pleasure, Cliff. One thing that I liked when we were discussing about this webinar, and I was constantly referring to you saying, Mr. Gondo, and said, no, Blessmo. I don't want you to say that. I want you to call me Cliff. Why? Because we're almost like in the private sector, because we deal with business people. So it's always a pleasure, Cliff, to have you. We also have from ZIMNAT, the underwriting manager from ZIMNAT, Ian Meza, joining us. Ian, a pleasant welcome. If you can unmute your microphone, Ian.
Hi, Blessmo. Hi, audience. I think I'm well this side.
Perfect. I can see you're well and fit and smiling. Perfect. Probably let me just start with you, Cliff. If you can always keep your microphone and muted, Cliff. When we talk of tendering, PRAZ happens to be at the top of the chain there. Maybe let's just begin by unpacking what is the role of PRAZ within the tendering process.
Okay. No, thank you, Blessing. But before I answer that question, Blessing, allow me to just give an overview of what public procurement is all about. Okay. Public procurement is central to any economy in the sense that it can be used as a policy lever by government. It's not just about making sure that government and various departments get what they want. Governments can also use public procurement to achieve socio-economic objectives. They can use it to create employment. They can use it to alleviate poverty and other social needs. Based on that, Section 4 of the Public Procurement Disposal of Public Assets Act provides for the objective of this act. Namely, one of the objectives is to ensure that public procurement is effected in a manner that is transparent, fair, honest, cost-effective, and competitive. So it's important for members, for colleagues on this platform to understand how our act ensures that. So in order to ensure that, the act provides that preparation of specifications, that is the requirements that are needed by state entities and tender documents are done in a neutral manner that is based on performance and functional requirements. What do I mean by this? Each time the government wants something, they must ask for it in a manner that is neutral, that is fair to everybody, that provides, in terms of suppliers. In terms of fairness also and cost effectiveness, we are saying we must also, as state entities, we must consider things such as life cycle costs. We should not just look at the price. We should not just look at things that are cheaper. We must look at how much like a vehicle is going to cost us in terms of fuel consumption. We are also looking at things such as bid opening. Whenever your members participate in the bidding process, the bids must be opened in a manner that is transparent and so on. The other objective of the Act is also to promote competition amongst bidders. The Act tries to achieve this by using competitive means. By competitive means, I'm saying, each time the government is buying, and by government, I'm referring to the state ministries, departments, and agencies. They must make sure that as many suppliers as possible participate in these processes. They are afforded opportunities to participate. And also, as part of increasing competition, the evaluation criteria that the department or the state agency is going to use must be known by the bidders. So each time your members are participating, they must know how the selection criteria is going to be like. Then the other objective is to provide for fair and equitable treatment of bidders, leading to procurement contracts that represent good value for money. I think the objective speaks for itself. However, I want to emphasize on the term equitable. there's a difference between fairness and equitable. If we are going to be fair, it means that we are going to treat Gondo and Sons enterprise the same as Costain, construction. That would be fair. But the act goes beyond fairness. It calls for equitable, where we are saying on certain contracts, you must realize that Gondo and Sons has got certain previous existing conditions that makes it difficult for us to compete with what? With Costain construction. So there are other provisions that will ensure that. Also, something that is of interest to your members is a domestic preference, where certain contracts can actually be awarded on the basis of what? Of domestic preference, where we're saying this contract, we're going to positively discriminate towards what? Local suppliers. Another objective is to promote the integrity and fairness and public confidence in procurement processes. How does our act ensure that? This act now calls for what we call a three-tier grievance redressal mechanism. A lot of businesses are not happy with the outcome of tenders. So this act now provides for what we say, in the first instance, if you are not happy, you must complain to the procuring entity, that is the agency or the department or the ministry that has flighted the tender. If you are not happy with their decision, then you escalate the issue to PRAZ. And PRAZ now, we are now a regulator. We don't have operational responsibilities. So we set up a review panel that looks into your issue. If you are still not happy, then you can escalate it to the administrative court, which is at par with the High Court. So these mechanisms are also meant to bring some integrity, some level of transparency in the manner in which your grievances are addressed. There are other provisions that support that mechanism. At the conclusion of each tender, bidders must be afforded an opportunity to be debriefed. By debriefing, we are saying, each time you are told that you have lost, you must be given an opportunity to say, what are the weaknesses of my bid? Based on the response that you have been given, you can now challenge that process, that process in terms of what I've just said. Then lastly, one of the objectives is to secure the implementation of any environmental, social, economic, and other policies that are authorized or required by any law to be taken into account by a procuring entity. I think that is a lot of English. In short, what we are saying is the last objective tries to achieve those horizontal objectives that I said. It is possible for a state entity to try and environmental laws as part of their evaluation to say, look, we don't want to award to you Gondo and Sons because you have some environmental laws that you have been fined for. And also in terms of selection criteria, a state entity can actually say, what is the nature of the packaging that you are using? If you are using packaging that is not environmentally friendly, you could find yourself also in trouble with the evaluation criteria. So, Blessing, in short, I would say these are the objectives of the Act. And having said this, I think now we can go into your question. And just to refresh my memory, you were saying, what is our role in all this? In short, I'm going to say to you, if we go to section 6, it defines our role. As a state entity, there are things that you guys want us to do that we can't do because we do have a mandate. And this act, by virtue of that, the fact that it went through our democratic processes, I'm saying there are things that you guys as Zimbabweans you don't want us to do. We've got a very strict role. And in short, our role is supervisory and monitoring. We no longer have operational responsibilities, unlike in the past where you had SPB. So when you have state entities saying that they are waiting for PRAZ, I think you really need to question them to say, what is the role of PRAZ in this sort of transaction? So our role is to monitor and to supervise, but for a detailed explanation, we need to go to section 6 that clearly identified what our role is. I hope I have clearly answered that first question.
That's quite correct. I think you have clearly covered that. Indeed, your role is to monitor and supervise. And I believe within the audience, within our delegates here, they have a lot of burning questions that they will tackle during the last part of the Q&A. As a general reminder to everyone, in terms of tendering, tendering is done across even in the private sector, it's done across even for NGOs. But today we are focusing on tendering within the public space, government-related entities, your state-owned enterprises as well. For many SMEs, whilst we digest what you said, Mr. Gondo, I know for those that are joining us, they are always wondering to say, my company is very small. When I win a tender, how will I fund my project? What support will I get when I look at the project? That is why so many SMEs are hesitant to participate in tenders. And let me put this question across to you, Ian. I know you do something and you are also a key stakeholder and a participant within the tendering process. As ZIMNAT, what is your role within the tendering process? Ian, if you can hear me, please unmute your microphone and go ahead. It appears Ian is having challenges with his network. He will be joining us shortly, and he will touch base on the role of ZIMNAT in terms of the tendering process and how they can support small businesses. But otherwise, I think we can continue with our discussion, and then we'll resume with Ian as soon as he joins us. One of the most contentious issues, Cliff, which I spoke about when we began this discussion. Many SMEs, we actually view tendering as something that is done by corrupt people, unethical people, and probably even the big companies which have got the muscle to really participate in tenders. In your view, do you think SMEs really stand a chance when they tender?
No, thank you, Blessing. I think I'm going to give a quick answer and then ask my colleague here to chip in with some of the details. I would say on face value, Blessing, if you really want to make money, please do business with the government. In any economy, the government is the biggest consumer of goods and services. Yes. If you go to South Africa, if you go wherever you go, the people that are really making it, they are doing business with the government. And Zimbabwe is no exception. So what am I saying? The rules actually know that. That's why I was saying we have a system that tries to use public procurement rules to try and grow the economy, to try and make sure that even small businesses participate. In the first instance, the most important thing when you are tendering is to understand the rules.
Yes.
Because governments spend a lot of money. Because governments spend a lot of money, there's need to regulate that environment. If you don't regulate it, public procurement by its very nature is a fertile ground for corruption. So like you rightly said. So these rules are meant to bring about those objectives that I mentioned. So for the small businesses, please understand the rules. Once you understand the rules, it means you can play the game. You can't play football unless if you know the rules. So for each contract, you'll find that there is what we call the criteria, the evaluation criteria, the eligibility criteria. Once you understand that, you must be able to submit a bid that is consistent with the requirement of the state entity. But for you to sit by the sidelines and say, look, this process is corrupt, should you win in a manner that you think you've been disenfranchised, you need to be able to challenge. But you can only challenge if you have played the game. You cannot challenge from the terraces. You need to be in the stadium, you need to register with us, you need to meet all the requirements that are required. The term that you have referred to, where you're saying tenderpreneurs, what it means is even small businesses can master this art. And as long as they fulfill the requirements, they should be allowed to play. So if you go to section 28 of the Act, it talks about eligibility criteria. You know, there are certain things that are required, like bidders must be ethical. So how do you meet that criteria? You need to belong to membership of your professional association. If you're selling vehicles, state entities will say, do you belong to the Motor Trades Association? If you are a consultant, are you a member of the Engineering Council? Do you belong to the Lawyers Association? And so on and so forth. What your members need to question is, sometimes state entities go overboard. They ask for criteria that is unduly restrictive. A state entity, for instance, wants to buy bond paper, and they say 5 years experience in supplying bond paper. They should be able to question that, to say, do I really need 5 years of having supplied bond paper to be able to supply 5 reams of bond paper? So what I would say in short, Blessing, is members must be knowledgeable about the Act. You can only play this game if you know the rules. Why do we need rules? We need rules because if you don't regulate this space, a lot of people will be unjustifiably made rich. There will be a lot of corruption and so on and so forth.
That's okay. Thank you so much. Indeed, the ball is on our court as SMEs. As you say, you cannot challenge from the terraces. You have to go into the pitch and play and challenge the big players who are in there. Indeed, that is fantastic. And I know many SMEs are thinking, no, let me wait for the terrace fight. The challenge for us to join and really get it.
Yeah. Something that I should also have mentioned, getting a look from one of my colleagues there, is certain contracts must also be divided in such a manner that the small players can be able to participate. The Harare Bedbridge Highway that you alluded to, if it had been issued as a single contract of 900 kilometers, none of the local players would have been able to do that road. But the state sometimes deliberately divide work into lots like with the example that I've given, that road has been divided into 9 lots of 100 kilometers each. These are small digestible chunks that even local players can participate in. So sometimes your members should also be able to say, look, we have seen the Minister of Transport, so that the Minister of Lands is constructing whatever, and if, unless if they divide it into small lots that we can also participate, why can't this work be divided into small lots? So this is something that they must also be alive to, and something that once they see the tender being flighted, you can challenge that.
Thank you for that, Cliff. Indeed, that is one way in which SMEs can come within the tendering process, whereby these big tenders are split, as you say. But at the same time, I believe there are also entrepreneurs who are out there. Probably the company is just a recently formed company, and they're thinking, how do I participate in tenders? Probably maybe in terms of technical ability, I do not have that. I am fairly small. Any advice that you can tell them when they're thinking of bidding?
Okay, it's not criminal to do joint bids. It's not criminal. So one of the things is lobbying. I think in Zimbabwe we lack the skills to lobby. Governments all over the world are huge entities, bureaucratic entities. The only way you speak to governments is through a collective voice, through your associations, and through platforms such as this. So, certain contracts you should be allowed to bid as joint bids, but you must also bear with the system. Here is a state entity. We don't want to be used as guinea pigs by small players as well. If you look at the Auditors General's report from 2018, collectively, the government of Zimbabwe paid almost 7 million for goods that were never delivered. And suspiciously, most of them were small companies that were added contracts and they did not have the capacity. So we need to, to reach a common ground somewhere. How do entities gain experience if we are not awarded the tenders? But how can we also have state entities being used as guinea pigs by people that do not have experience in the work that they want to do? So we could look at joint bids, and also you could gain traction by doing small contracts. You have to build a capacity by bidding for small contracts. Unfortunately, some of our colleagues on this platform, they want to go for the big ones. They want, without any experience of having constructed a dam, they want to go for building dams such as Tokwe Mkosi. You have to start with the small swimming pools, build your capacity, and then, you know, grow from there.
That's okay. Thank you so much for that, Cliff. It actually reminds me of one of statements which was actually said by one of the panelists we had on this platform a few weeks ago, Tofara Shokera. She said when she came here that as business people, you should not look at each other as competitors, but you should always look for opportunities to collaborate, which I believe is the same thing that we are talking about at the moment, to say, let's look at synergies which we can create as SMEs, and then we combine our expertise and approach the entity that has flighted the tender and submit one, as you said, a joint bid, and obviously the other ways in which they can work together. Let me just, I think, Ian is back on the call. Ian, are you back? If you are back, please confirm. I think we are still having some challenges with our co-panelist, Ian. Just a gentle reminder, this is, ZIMNAT network is quite unstable because of obviously the challenges that we were having as a country. But otherwise, I think we can also continue with our discussion. Let's maybe just probably move into the bidding process. I am an SME and I'm coming to probably participate in a bid for the first time. Normally what happens is that the procuring entity will fly an advert, but maybe it's ZESA, they will say we need transformers, and I see that advert in the newspaper. Where do I take it from there?
Okay, in terms of the actual processes, one of the challenges that has been addressed by this new act is that of standard bid documents. State entities, when they want to communicate with the bidding community, by bidding community, I mean the SMEs, the suppliers, we use bid documents. You have to buy bid documents. So one of the things that may be of interest to you is that the cost of those documents must not be more than the cost of producing them. You know, the cost of the bid documents must not be more than the cost of producing them. It is not a fundraising exercise to issue bid documents. So they should be able to complain that these bid documents are too expensive. In fact, the good news is, if people read the laws, if you read that act, it will tell you that if you request for it using your letterhead in writing, you can get a soft copy for free of the bid document. You don't have to pay for it. However, there are challenges. You know how crafty our SMEs are. When you get a soft copy, you start changing the contents of the bid document. So sometimes state entities are reluctant to issue those soft copies. But however, like I said, you should be able to engage them and request for this. The bid document explains the requirements, the specifications. It has got certain deadlines. And, you know, in terms of, you can query the content of the bid document, you could query the specifications if you feel they're not neutral. I'll give examples of motor vehicles. If the bid document says we want a Toyota, if you're Mazda, you can query and say, look, you can't do that. Just tell us the vehicle that you want and what you want to use it, so that we can also participate. You know, you can query some other, anything that you see in the document, even the submission dates. If you think that, look, for this kind of tender, we need a lot of time, and you guys want to close this tender in a few days' time, it's not enough to submit a good tender. Then you have got a timeline. If the tender is open for, say, argument's sake, 20 days, you can only complain or seek clarification about that document up to day number 10. Up to day number 10. The reason is we want to allow the state entity enough time to make corrections and advise you. They do not only advise the person that has queried, but everybody else who has bought the document. Then also, I think something that is pertinent is the validity period. You need to fill in the document in a manner that is consistent with the expectations of the entity. Once the closing period is, the deadline has been met, it means it's dead. You can't submit a minute after. You can submit your documents, anytime before the closing period. Then the other thing that I can also mention with regard to that is the aspect that once you have submitted, you are now limited in terms of communicating with the entity. We do have problems where your members, suppliers, start phoning, inquiring what is taking place, asking for progress, trying to influence the system. That is also illegal. I don't want to preempt because the story of tendering is quite long. I think I'll end it there and just ask my colleague Enya to add if there's anything that I've missed out. Okay.
That's fine. Thank you for
He
that.
seems to be happy with the response that I've given.
Yes, I know you said she's the one who tackles the difficult questions. Don't worry, we'll also get to that point and she will join us. Thank you for that in terms of the guidelines on where we start in terms of bidding. But the audience that we have today, as we said, we are starting from probably companies that have recently registered and also the companies that have already been at it for a while. In terms of bidding, in terms of the categories that are there, I know there are a lot of categories that are there for our bids. But at the same time, in terms of our audience today, they do various businesses. But any advice that you can give them to say these categories, normally SMEs have a higher chance in terms of being considered for bids.
Okay, yeah, that's a difficult question.
Yes.
The reason why we have categories is because we're trying to get away from a situation whereby you find a small business wants to supply aircraft space, they want to participate in dam construction, so the categories were meant for people to specialize. So to start with, you can only participate in tenders for which you are registered. One of the challenges that we have is our critics say that we are not vetting you at the point of registration. And we have said as PRAZ, we can't vet people when they are registering other than making sure that they are registered, they have got the relevant paperwork. We can't evaluate them at PRAZ because we are saying we don't know the nature of the tenders that you are going to participate in. If you register for a category for stationery, at PRAZ will not stop you from registering because maybe you are going to participate in tenders for supplying just a few reams of bond paper, or you want to participate in a tender for 1,000 reams. So at our level, we are not going to be too strict in terms of what you can and what you can't do. But registration is the first requisite step that you must take. You must register with us. Then my other suggestion is that for the small tenders, they're not going to be advertised in the newspapers. There's the issue of threshold. The things that are advertised are based on threshold. The small things that are bought on a daily basis, these are advertised on the company website. And we're trying to make sure that they start doing that religiously. But also another way of making sure that you are given a chance to participate is, say you want to do business, you do stationery, you want to do business with the University of Zimbabwe, there is nothing to stop you from taking your profile to the University of Zimbabwe Procurement Management Unit, which is the department, and you give them your profile and you tell them that you are into stationery. So that each time they want stationery, they can also request you to submit your quotations. In terms of quotations, please also make sure that when you submit your quotations, they are in sealed envelopes. You don't want to have a situation whereby you give them an open quote, they look at it and they tell their friends that you have, your prices are such and such. So that's one area. You need to participate in you need to be known to these people, because the law requires that as long as they've got a minimum of 3 quotations, they can go ahead and do an evaluation. If your quotation is not part of those 3, no matter how cheap you are, nobody's going to buy from you.
That's great. Thank you so much. I know a lot of people are probably a bit hesitant in terms of where do I start, and you've simplified it for us to say the first step is to register with PRAZ. And as you said, in terms of the requirements there, what you said, I think those are minimal requirements, and any SME here should be able to qualify for most of the categories that are there. Again, within that same vein, in terms of extending the support to SMEs, let me just revert back to what we discussed earlier on, when I said some of the SMEs really hesitant to come and play within the field of tenders because they think they will not have sufficient capital to finance their project. And I'm glad and happy to say that Ian is back. Ian, if you can please go ahead and just just a minute. I think we are still having connectivity issues, with Ian. Ian, if you can hear me, please go ahead.
If Ian is listening, I think there's something that he may also address that may be of interest to your members in terms of capacity.
Yes.
Generally, government does not want to pay in advance because
that's correct.
Constantly we have our fingers bent when we pay in advance. On the other hand, we have SMEs that are saying they don't have the capacity. So banks can come in between and help. When you have got what we call an advance payment guarantee from a bank, meaning that you're not going to run away, the state entity can, in theory, give in advance. Please, I'm saying this with a lot of caveats, and I'm not saying, look, you're going to be, all I'm saying is you stand a better chance of being paid in advance if you've got an advance payment guarantee. And it's something that Ian could probably say, okay, what do they require for them to give you an advance payment guarantee?
Thank you for that, Cliff. Ian, I know you're using Tasha's profile. If you can please unmute. Ian,
I Blessmo.
Thank you.
I Blessmo.
Ian, glad to have you back. I know you've been struggling with network there.
My apologies to the audience. I think my network wasn't really okay. Yeah.
Great. I think we're just glad to have you back. We're just discussing with Cliff at the moment to say in what way can you help SMEs, especially when they win their tenders or prior to tendering. If you can go ahead, please.
Oh, come again.
It's fine. I can hear you clearly, Ian. My question to you is, Ian, many SMEs, they struggle when they win tenders, especially in terms of funding. The question to you is, how are you as ZIMNAT able to assist your SMEs at that space?
Okay. It's always been a challenge. I think probably let me try to explain the model that we have with Benge BC, because it's something that is actually starting from the tender stage, where SMEs have participated on these tenders. We coming in to provide the required surety bonds, or you might call them guarantees to bidders. But we have a model with the Benge BC where ZIMNAT is the ultimate risk carrier there. So the model seeks to provide the guarantees to applicants at the lowest affordable cost and less stringent conditions. If an applicant goes direct to the bank normally without any partner, which is an insurance, there's issues of cash collateral, even purely mortgage that are required. But our model seeks to eliminate those elements. An applicant doesn't have to provide any collateral, really, as well as we try to make sure that the cost is affordable to them. So this is at a tender stage. Definitely, that's a bid bond that is required. But further, when these small businesses have then successfully awarded contracts, there are issues of capacity, which is financial capacity, that is then required. I think that's your question, and that's what Cliff was also asking. The model also supports advance payment. If government have negotiated with the client to then disperse a certain amount of money, which is probably for mobilization, ZIMNAT and Benge BC can issue an advance payment guarantee, which is a security to the government in the event that the funds are misused or are diverted. Then they can fall back on that guarantee. But that's when the government is willing to make available the required advance payment. But now comes to an issue where probably the government is not willing to disperse any advance in early stage. Then a client has to, the contractor has to seek his own finance on that contract. Let me say one of the complications before I explain. We right now, I'm sitting on some of the these are claims now of we have managed to facilitate some contractors to seek finance within any bank. We can do it with any bank. Preferably, we would want to do it with Bank ABC, but you know, liquidity is always a challenge. So sometimes another bank might come in and is willing to fund. But then after the contractor is performed, there are issues now of payment where government then delay to pay. So when government delays to pay to this client, it qualifies as a bond code to us. So, you know, now and then we are receiving those kind of claims where it's just government that is delaying to pay. We all know government does not default, but it delays. But that delay qualifies a bond code. So we keep paying now and then claims because government is delaying. And the value of money is also lost to ourselves. As much as probably we might then recover, but we might recover after 3 months, after 6 months, after a year. Then it doesn't make business sense to us. So we might then find it very difficult to support projects from the government because of that scenario. Because myself or ourselves as ZIMNAT as well, we have also suppliers of capacities. We have reinsurers at our bank who are actually ultimate carriers of this risk. So when we have this kind of scenario where we are receiving claims now and then, where within the issue of delay of payment, then it becomes difficult for them to support us as well. That's why we always insist to the advance payment, because we want government to add their skin first. They feel it, they will feel it, the pinch, they put their money first, we give them an advance payment guarantee. The contractors goes on the ground, do the mobilization, start to work, so that they generate subsequent claims, which they then use to fund the progressive of the contract. That's my explanation on it. So it's becoming very difficult to support government projects. There are situations as well, I can tell you, I wouldn't name some of the parastatals or government agencies where the money is put aside, right, for projects. They actually show you that, look, this is what we do, these are the documents, this is the money that goes to this account, and it's probably, say it's for road construction, right? And it's secured there. But by the time contractors do their performance and they're now requesting payment, the money is gone, is vanished from those secured accounts. somebody within those agencies or prestadors told me that there might be issues. For example, we have Cyclone Idai that came. So there are issues where the government then say, okay, we have this money set aside for projects, but now there is Cyclone Idai. We need to make sure that our people are well taken care of. So they now take that portion of money, put it to the Cyclone Idai, that disaster. We then comes to payment of the contractors finished his works. The payment cannot come, and that qualifies for a bond call. So those are some of the challenges now we are facing as insurers to fund government projects. But we are willing to get into some probably models where we try to make sure that as much as that fund is set aside for projects, how best can we secure that so that even something that it might not then be taken for other uses. If we can get into such kind of arrangement where we can assist these contractors to seek finance from any bank.
Thank you, Ian. As a risk person, for me, I'm comfortable. I know, those risks are always, covered. But probably maybe just to summarize and put what Ian has said into perspective. Let's say, for example, you are into construction, get a tender to construct maybe head office for Net1. Before you go on site, there is something that is called mobilization, which Ian spoke about. Essentially, you need fuel for your machinery to go on site. You need funding for you to pay, probably if you are hiring equipment. You need funding probably maybe to fence that area where you are constructing the building. This is a mobilization before you start the project. Half the time you need funding for that, which is what Ian referred to, say you can go to the procuring entity and negotiate and find out if they are willing to give you an advance on the back of a guarantee, which Ian will facilitate with Bank BC. In terms of our time, we are slightly running out of our time, but I will request Emma to share contact details for Ian and for Bank BC on our comment section. Cliff, I can see you've been furiously taking notes there. Would you want to comment on what Ian has just said? Please go ahead and unmute your microphone, Cliff.
No, thank you very much. Ian did highlight a number of challenges with the system, the financial system. And, we are vigorously working with our partners in Treasury, with the procuring entities. Procuring entities are all different. There are some who have their own funds. There are some that get money from Treasury. Then with certain projects, we have like the local authorities with construction, they get their funds from ZINARA. So we have been looking at all this. What Ian has described, I think it's a situation that we are also aware of. As a regulator, we are doing the best we can to try and get all the players together. I'm sure you noticed under COVID, we did issue guidelines that required that people were paid within 7 days. One of the issues that the actors tried to do to try and minimize the problems that Ian has highlighted with respect to payment is that the Act under Section 22 requires that every procuring entity in Zimbabwe must have a procuring plan. What does this mean? It means two things to the SME. At some point, you should be able to know what a state entity is going to buy throughout the year. You should be able to go, in theory, you must go to our website and see what PRAZ is going to buy for an entire 12-month cycle, meaning that you can now prepare for that. You no longer need to bribe somebody to tell you that we will need a photocopier next month. You don't have to buy somebody lunch. Secondly, the requirements, the pre-requirements for coming up with a procurement plan is that you can only plan if you've got the funds. You need to match your plans to your budget. So you can't advertise for things if you don't have the money. You can't go into a restaurant and enjoy a good meal if you don't have money to pay for. So these are certain reforms, but however, the issue of payment are much bigger than what we are discussing, and we are looking into it. It is the intention of government that we are able to be able to meet our obligations. We should only issue orders if and only if we have got the money.
Thank you so much for that, Cliff. I know we have spoken a lot, but for us to really add value to everyone who is listening to this call, I can say Mr. Ngata from SADC is really each day he posts a question on our comments section. What we are going to do for now, as I said, we really need this to be really lively and participative discussion. I'm just going to open up for our questions. We really wanted to cover a lot, but we will share the contacts for PRAZ, the contacts for NABC, and the contacts for ZIMNAT. We know we cannot cover everything under this platform. So for those people who have issues that they have beyond the questions, we can always reach out. But let me just start by a question that has been raised. I can see an A30 there, but I can see the face. I know that should be Mr. Ngata. The question is directed to the PRAZ team. I know Mr. Cliff is there, Kenya is there, and Arno is there. The first question is, how best can we submit our complaints on tender procedures, especially where it's glaring that the tender is preferred to the benefit of one individual command? That is the first question. I don't know, Cliff, if you'd want to touch on that.
Okay. If you see in the first instance that the tender is designed to benefit a particular individual, you should be able to challenge that. It could be in the manner in which the specifications have been put across, and you see that there's only one player in the market. Why are they not just going to that person? So you should be able to challenge that. And unfortunately, people have been scared to challenge because they've always been afraid that in future it will be used against them. Nothing could be further from the truth. So all I'm saying is, the moment you have evidence that this tender has been designed to favor somebody in terms of specifications, in terms of even the timelines, where sometimes a requirement could be, I'll give you just a quick, I once interacted with the people from the, that do provide provision of security guards. They came to me and said, look, we don't see this requirement that we must have guards. The number of guards that we have been used to evaluate us. In this economy, no one is employing guards unless you've got contracts. If I want qualified guards, I can just recruit them within a day. So you give me a contract and I'll have the guards. But if you want to give me a contract based on having the guards, so they managed to challenge that. You'll find that in the adverts now, they are not asking for the staff establishment. So colleagues, all I can say in short, challenge anything that you think is not fair.
Let me come on. So in terms of the challenge, where is the challenge sent to? If I've got an issue, who do I direct it to?
Okay. I'll get Enya to comment on this one.
That's fine. Enya, you can comment if you're able to turn your video so that people can see you. There you are. Great. You can go ahead, Enya.
All right. Thank you very much, Blessing. When it comes to challenging a procurement process, the challenge has to be lodged to the accounting officer, because the procurement notice will be coming from the accounting officer. And in terms of our constituents, they need to be guided by Section 73 of the Act. So a challenge is lodged with the accounting officer, but there's no harm in copying the regulator.
Okay, I think that's fine. So they can copy you, and obviously when they don't have feedback, they are also able to follow up with them, just to touch base and say, I sent this to to ZTTDC, I haven't got any response. Please unmute your microphone, Enya.
So I think we missed the question, sorry.
That's fine. She had said if you have got a complaint, you can always direct it to the procuring entity and CC PRAZ as the regulator. So
Okay,
the follow-up, yeah, it's fine.
I wanted to emphasize the point that Enya raised. She's basically saying the Act says you have got 3 levels of complaining. In the first instance, go to the people that have flighted the notice that are handling the tender and complain to them. They must do a self-review to say, okay, if they were wrong, they will tell you how they're going to resolve it. And their timelines in line with Section 73. There are 2 aspects. There is what we call a complaint and a challenge. Usually a challenge, you are challenging a decision that they've made. So if it's a challenge where a tender has been awarded, it means that you have to pay a deposit, because if you don't do that, we have people that are just doing this to cause problems. So you must also put your money where your mouth is. And then if it's a complaint with respect to you not being happy with timelines, if they don't resolve it in a manner that you are satisfied with, you can now escalate it to the regulator. If you rush to the regulator, we'll send you back. If you go to the courts, they will tell you to follow the procedure, because this is coming from an act of what? Of Parliament. Unless if you can prove that your constitutional rights are now being violated by this act, then you stand a better chance of going to the Constitutional Court.
That's okay. Thank you so much for that, Cliff. A follow-up question is related to this issue. We know at the moment our currency is losing value at a fast pace. So the question is in terms of price escalations and variations. For example, in this case, a tender was done in 2018 and awarded in 2019. So the question is to say, what then can SMEs do in terms of price variation and escalation?
No, thank you. The challenge with procurement questions or public procurement is you don't have short answers. So I'm going to refer colleagues to, at a time that's convenient to you, familiarize yourselves with Section 81 of the Act. Once there's a contract, because there are 2 instances. Sometimes you colleagues, you bid, you want to supply a cell phone to a state entity. You tell them that it's going to cost, you've got one for $100. Before you even deliver it, you are already asking for a price increase. It's not fair. It means you have lied. We call it lowballing. So you must be disqualified. Instead of delivering the cell phone, you want to deliver a price increase. That's one instance. Then the other instance is where you have got a contract. The law is simple. It says, look, part of your contract terms must be how are you going to vary prices. Any good contract must speak to how you are going to change prices. If you don't include that in your contract, the law takes the view that you didn't forget about it. You didn't want prices to be increased. So the law takes the view that they're not there to protect us from poor negotiations. If you included it, you must increase the prices in line with what you wanted to do. As a regulator, we are limited in trying to intervene in contracts. So SMEs, when you have been awarded a contract, when you're negotiating the contract, agree on formulas that you're going to use to say if you don't pay us, prices will go up. And once you've agreed to that, you just implement your contracts as per contractual terms. The problem is our environment has been affected by inflation. So try and factor that into contracts. There's also a provision that said if price increases are more than 20%, the PE may what? Cancel the contract. That clause was meant to protect state entities, because what was also happening is people would, especially when we're under the US dollar era, people would unjustifiably increase contracts. So in short, what I want to say, Blessing, is we need to also avoid using price increases to unjustifiably enrich ourselves.
That's okay. Thank you for that, Cliff. If I may request you to mute your microphone, probably when Cliff is talking, I think there's a bit of feedback that is coming back to the listeners. Let me come back to the next questions. I think there are really a lot of questions here. This question comes from Sunga Chisina. The question is, what is the difference between call for expression of interest and invitation to a competitive bid? What is the difference between expression of interest and invitation to a competitive bid?
Okay, I always try to avoid this technical question because they are there in the Act. They are well defined. Okay. But however, an expression of interest is a method that is used to procure consultant services. In our Act, it has got a strict view, which is similar to what the World Bank does. An expression of interest is used when you are procuring consultant services that are above 5.2 million Zimbabwe dollars. The figures can always change because of inflation. So an expression of interest, we use this to shortlist. You are shortlisting between 3 and 6 consultants. Then the other one was what?
I think that was the question, expression of interest and competitive bidding.
Okay, competitive bidding is basically the method of choice, the preferred method of buying goods, whereby we're saying there must be competition. People must run a race. Tendering is an auction. You know, unlike the auction at ABC that you all know of, when we are buying, because ABC is selling, when the government is buying, we use an auction, but it's a reverse auction. We buy from the lowest bidder instead of the highest bidder. If we want to buy cell phones, we make sure that this is the cell phone that we want and all that. Then the rest is now $10, $9, $8, $5. You know, we are now doing a reverse. So we call that a competitive process. So the best idea of buying is the preferred method is through a competitive process. However, if you go into our Act, there are instances where you cannot run a competitive process. There's an emergency. It's Zimoco. You want to buy a Mercedes-Benz. There's only Zimoco. It's a waste of taxpayers' money to pretend to be advertising when we know there's only one person on the market, and so on and so forth. So there are examples under Section 30 where where a competitive process is not ideal.
That's okay. Thank you for that. I know there are a lot of questions that have actually been typed, but I'll probably take maybe 1 or 2 questions. If you want to ask questions directly to our panelists, you can just raise your hand, and then Emma will allow you to talk to our panelists. So if you want to ask a question directly, please, you can go ahead, raise your hand whilst I read the next question that came through. The question here, the next question that I'm seeing is coming from Tapua Kobo. There's an issue that you touched on, Cliff, which is on the threshold. So the question here is, what is the maximum value of a contract that can be handled without going to tender? I know you've spoken about threshold, but I think the question is, with regards to the value.
The thresholds are now in. So thresholds are now in $, but I'll ask Enya to give you the specific, thresholds.
Oh, okay. If it's in relation to procurement of goods, it's 175,000. So anything above 175,000 goes to tender, but anything below that, quotations are used. If it is construction works, it's 350,000. Then consultants and non-consultant services is 87,500.
Sorry, and I can come again on the amount?
These figures are already provided in SI 49 of 2020.
Okay. You know how it is. Sometimes, you know, when they say when you want to write something, make sure you write it somewhere. And you know, if you can just state the figures again, please.
Is in relation with goods, it's $175,000. If it is construction works, it's 350,000. Then consultants and non-consultant services, 87,500. But if our SMEs go to SI 49 of 2020, it's provided for.
Also, maybe just to add to what the threshold, I will not worry too much about them. You see them changing very soon. What it simply means is state entities are afforded an opportunity to buy low value items much quicker without advertising, without, so this will change from time to time. Because of inflation, you find that we're in the process of trying to revise these figures.
Thank you for that, Cliff. Let me just read out a question from Wellington. He's using Godo. He said, "Hi, Wellington from South Africa here. I am a bit worried about developing SMEs through tender models in Zimbabwe because of sustainability. Personally, I do not believe in SME development through tender models. Your thoughts, please." Let me give, put this question to Ian. Ian, if you're able to take it, and probably Oliver can also come in. Ian, your thoughts on, tendering for SMEs? Wellington is saying he's not comfortable with that.
Hello, Blessmo.
Yes. Did you hear the question?
Oh, come again on the question.
The question from Wellington is saying, "I'm a bit worried about developing SME through tender models in Zimbabwe because of sustainability issues. Personally, I do not believe in SME development through tenders." And your thoughts? That is a question from Wellington. I don't know what's your take. I know you yourself, you facilitate trade.
Yeah, but I think tender models are also viable for developing SMEs, because government is one of the biggest buyer and also the biggest supplier in any economy. So I think probably what you might want to understand is, besides tender models, there are other business models which is probably outside the government that SMEs can then pursue. But that does not mean tender models will not build SMEs. Government in any economy is the biggest buyer, is the biggest supplier. So if you're not part of those kind of models, you're losing out a lot.
Thank you for that, Ian. But maybe let me put Wellington's question into perspective. I also happen to know Wellington personally. He manages, one of the biggest funds in terms of development funding in South Africa. And I hope after this call, Ian myself will be able to reach out to Wellington so that he can also, do something to invest in Playhome. Ndoma ambassador takatumira kuJonai. And we will definitely take this offline. Mr. Cliff, would you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think Wellington rightly put it that he's expressing a personal opinion, so there can never be anything wrong with that. However, sometimes we benchmark. Like in South Africa, they actually have what they call enterprise development, which is something that we're saying in Zimbabwe. We may talk about Section 29 that talks about domestic preference, unless if we look at this holistically in terms of enterprise development, we're not going to win this war. If we look at the countries that have developed, that have experienced a lot and like what Ian said, you cannot really develop them without state involvement because this is the biggest player. So, it becomes an academic argument to say what is the mode of growth that is best. There are obviously pros and cons for each one of those, but I think in Zimbabwe, we actually need to do more to try and develop the SMEs. We need to set benchmarks for the ZESAs, for the ZINARAs, to be able to do enterprise development, supply development, so that they can have measurable results in terms of what they've done to develop our small businesses.
Thank you for that, Cliff. There was a question that has been asked on where people can access the Act and SIs, and I'm happy to say that ENIA has responded. I hope, Emma, if you can see that if you're able to copy and paste the message to everyone. The SIs and the Acts are available on the website that has been shared by ENIA. Let me see if I'm able to do it now. You can see that on the website for PRAZ, www.praz.gov.zw. Right. I think, there's a hand that is up. Emma, if you're able to identify the hand that is up so that they can ask their question directly, you just need one person at a time, please. Emma. Right, you can go ahead, sir, using the phone A30. Emma, if you can hear me, please unmute the first person who is asking the question.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Wilfred is my name.
That's fine. It's a pleasure. I know you joined the call last week.
Thank you. Thank you, Blessmore.
Thank
you, Ian. Thank you, Blessmore. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Cliff and Enya. A follow-up to the question that I had raised before on tender award, where the tenders were done in US dollar, awarded in 2019, started working because of the changes that we all know, the instruments that were used by the government. It then affected the mode of payment, where we are receiving payments in local currency, where we are at the mercy of the user ministry, where they determine what they think is the best rate instead of the bank rate, because the tender was done in US dollars. Now, we know that Cliff said you have a right to complain, but remember, out of record, you can complain, but there are consequences that are in line with complaining. Let's put that one aside. What is PRAZ doing where the ministry decides to pay 1:1? They sit on a payment for 9 months, 8 months. When the payment comes, you are paid $1 equivalent to 1 RTGS. When you raise an issue, you are told we are still considering it. And that has happened several occasions. And we are struggling as contractors to move. Because we make noise, you know, your head is on the block. How best can you protect us? How can we grow our business, our construction companies, when this thing is happening and nothing is being done to help us? But one thing for sure, I want to appreciate the government is doing their best to support us.
Okay, thank you for that, Cliff. Let me ask Cliff to respond to the question from Wilfred, if you can. I know we are running out of time. We'll just try to be as succinct as we can.
Okay. No, thank you, Bless. I'll try to be quick. This is a very important question, and it's something that is at the center of what we do and what these contractors are saying. All I can say is when we say the objective of the Act is to ensure transparency, fairness, and cost effectiveness. Fairness does not mean fair to the government only. It means fair to all the players. It is government, it is not government, let me repeat this slowly. It is not government's intention to destroy businesses, you know. And it is not this act's intention to kill small businesses. So unfortunately, some of these issues that you're alluding to have gone through the courts, and the courts have made certain determination. As PRAZ, I cannot comment in terms of the financial instruments because we get answers from the Minister of Finance with respect to that, to those in the RBZ. What I can quickly say to you colleagues is that the system has to be fair to all players for this country to progress. But on your part, there's the danger that you want to unjustly enrich yourselves. When you had a US dollar contract, say, of 1 million, and the exchange rate is now at 72, there's a temptation that you will come to the government and say, look, you now owe me 72 million. You know, this is not fair. When we go into the contract of 1 million USD, if we break it down, there was labor, there was diesel, there was, you know, not all those components have gone up by a factor of the currency. If you look at diesel, when it was 1:1, I mean, back then, it was going for $1 what? Maybe $1.30. If you look at the going rates now, you know, most of these things were actually cheaper. If you look at labor, you know, labor is now cheaper than that. So what we're saying is, when you are doing your variations, you can't just go and say, look, let me multiply by the exchange rate. It's not fair. Just like my salary, if I was earning 1,000, it has not gone up by 72. I'm not earning 72,000. Meaning the employees that you are paying, you're not paying them $72,000. You're paying them whatever. So on the portion for labor, you must increase by the NEC rate. It's a long answer, and there's a lot that we can always discuss with you. But if you approach government using what I'm giving you, you stand a better chance of having your price variations approved.
Thank you for that, Cliff. What I'm going to request, I hope I did not see Arno. I hope she's on the call. Please confirm for me, Cliff, is Arno joining us on the call?
Yes, she is. It's just that they've been having some problems of connectivity as well.
That's fine, but if she is, I'm asking her to, I'm requesting her if she can share the contact details which, you know, people can direct some of the issues that they have. I know there's a lot that is actually been mentioned, but because of time, we may probably not be able to afford sufficient time for everything. Then maybe
I think what I could also suggest is to talk to Arno with a view of providing training, because one of the problems is actually capacity building on the part of our SMEs. So we can talk these things until the cows come home, and as long as there's lack of capacity. So it's very small cost to them. We can arrange for training as well. But however, I know we'll post our details, our contact details for future communication.
That's okay. Thank you so much. We, as Benge BC, we definitely will arrange for that capacity building, for that training in terms of tenders. Let me just come to Ian as we round off this discussion. To the SMEs, Ian, to the SMEs that joined us, you know, for this discussion, what would be your advice? What would be your takeaway words? What do you think, you know, what you want to say to them today with regards to issues of tenders, with regards to opportunities that are there in the tender process?
Thanks, Blessmo. I think in summary, what I can say is the door to the SMEs is the door is open for everyone, and they have to take up the risk. There will always be leakages or bias of regulations, but the relevant stakeholders are always working on this. But that's not an excuse to avoid the participation. Bigger companies started as smaller companies. Then they need to seek financial literacy and design clear models, business models, because financial institutions, this is where they are very peculiar with, because they want to see the business models that they have. Are they bankable? Are they supportive? If you're seeking guarantees as well, we need experience. We're looking at whom we're dealing with, because as we are trying to give instrument to the people who are professional, the people who knows their job. Remember, these are just lines of credit. So in the event of a loss, there is definitely a recourse action against the defaulter. So we are not in the business of paying really claims, but we want to facilitate trade in our economy. So the instrument is designed to make sure that the task is executed properly. Then the same as well, they need to join the respective associations for ethics, professional guidance. They can as well, secure joint ventures, get into consortiums, which will enable them to secure funding, as well as a muscle to compete with bigger firms. I think that's my in summary.
Thank you for that, Ian. The way you put it, you actually put it quite clearly. And I'm also happy and excited about the partnership that is there between Benge BC and ZIMNAT, wherein if you need your bid bonds, your advance guarantees, your performance bonds, you can always get that, especially for this product was done for SMEs. You do not need collateral for the service trace. You do not need collateral for you to get your bid bond. You do not need collateral for you to get your advance guarantees and also your performance guarantees as well. Let me come to you, Cliff, any ways that you want to share with our SMEs that joined the call today. And, if you can just start by attending to one quick question that was asked to say, when procuring entities advertise these tenders, where do they advertise? Where do you see these tenders? And then you can go on to your closing words.
Okay. In the first instance, tenders are advertised in the government gazette. Entities must also advertise on their notice boards and on their websites. However, as PRAZ, we are working on a centralized website where you could access these tenders in terms of all the information, who has advertised, closing date, and so on. But the most reliable is the government gazette. As in terms of closing remarks, I want to just thank you. It is worth doing business with the government. And but however, in terms of SMEs, you need to be more, for lack of a better word, you need to be more organized. One of the challenges that we have is when we want to tell state entities to say, promote SMEs, use preference provisions in the Act, they don't know who the SME is. What is the definition? How do we distinguish you from the rest of the pack? So you need to lobby the government to come up with definitions. Look at what the South Africans have. They've got their BEE with certificates and so on. There are some ladies that I see on the platform. We need to know which the women-owned businesses. Who are they? What is the definition and so on? Without that, it is difficult to promote you. I think Ian will agree with me. Even as a bank, I don't know how you classify these people to be SMEs. So we need to have some standards in terms of how we do business, in terms of how, but it has to come from the small businesses themselves in terms of how they engage government. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cliff. And the good thing is I just received a message here from Mr. Tembo from ZIMNAT to say the training that you alluded to in terms of capacity building for SMEs. ZIMNAT has said, no, I think they are willing to come in and take the tape for that and facilitate that training. And definitely let me put out there that, as Benge BC and ZIMNAT, we are definitely going to arrange for this training session. We have seen that there is great appetite for this, and this is the way in which we can support our SMEs. Let me just take this opportunity to advise that in terms of any further questions, there are contact numbers that have been shared on the through our chat on the chat box, where contact numbers for PRAZ and contact numbers for Benge BC and contact numbers for ZIMNAT as well. Let me take this opportunity to thank the team from PRAZ, the Cliff Gondo, the Capacity Building Director for PRAZ, for taking the time to come through and share, how SMEs can participate in the tendering process. It's always great, that we're able to reach out and communicate with the government department. And your door was quite open. Let me also thank Enya and Arno again from PRAZ. And I will also thank from our partners Ian, who took the time to join us this afternoon. Despite the network challenges that we had, I believe we had a fantastic discussion. And to everyone who joined us for this afternoon, I know some were hesitant to participate on tenders, but from the information that we shared today, I'm encouraging you, if you feel that this is the direction that you want your business to go in. As Cliff said, and even as Ian said, the government is the biggest player in this country. There's no reason why you should not be taking this opportunity to participate in tenders. So for now, what's left for me is just to wish everyone a pleasant afternoon. And for any further questions, please reach out to the numbers that have been shared, and we'll be happy to pick up the conversation. Happy Yellow Friday, everyone. Bye-bye.